Leader's Edge,
where
Learning is a never-ending
journey, limitless vistas. Good day, everybody. Welcome to Season 9, Episode 1 of The Leader's Edge by SEASPBI. And today, we are on Season 9, Episode 1 with none other than Felix Dan S. Lopez. He is the Vice President for HR at Cebu Pacific Air. He used to be with San Miguel Corporation and JG Summit Holdings Incorporated. And he also sat as Vice President of the People Management Association of the Philippines, otherwise known as PMAP. Today, he is going to discuss with us the work outlook at the airline industry. So let's welcome to the virtual stage our guest, Felix. How are you?
Hi, Dino. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I'm excited and humbled to be invited by you in this program.
Wow, so are we, especially because of how things have been happening in our country. The last 2 years, we've had an incredibly devastating pandemic, not just devastating to our health, but to our economy as well. So, to get our show started, I would like to ask you a question. Uh, how do you mitigate the negative impact of COVID and current world events in your industry?
Dino, it goes without saying that aviation is one of the severely hit industries given the pandemic, right? But I take pride in saying that Cebu Pacific, which I am representing today, weather the turbulence as best as we can. On an org standpoint, we were quick to maneuver our business as usual activities to what we call future citizenship. So we did a lot of planning and implementation on things that we had to be agile about and implemented those quickly. We were also very agile in adopting new workplace practices to ensure health and safety of our employees and above all else, because we are in an airline and no profit is coming in, we were very deliberate and committed to securing our financial liquidity runway. On the people side, as HR leader, it was painful, but we had to do right sizing, very difficult. As an HR leader, I had sleepless nights, but despite the hardships, what I can say is that we think we were successful at carrying out the waves of right sizing in our organization. In fact, our story, headstrong against headwinds, as you would like to call it, captured the whole transformation journey for us to thrive in the pandemic.
Wow. So it means that though it was painful at the start, and of course you had to make tough decisions to make it all work out, it sort of leveled out at the end. So I'm kind of wondering, what is your current work arrangement in the new normal, and why is it that way?
You know, I think like many companies, not only in the Philippines but globally, Cebu Pacific is now operating on a hybrid setup. We started April of this year because during the pandemic, starting from the lockdown March 2020 up until March of 2022, of course, some of our employees who need to be on site, like our cabin crew and pilots and some of our aircraft engineers, they have to really be on site, right? But for other roles or other positions that can actually do remote working, then we've given that option for them to do remote working. But now that we are seeing significant improvements in our public health situation, which is a very good indication, we also are seeing an increase in our network. So we're flying more frequencies. If during the pandemic, our flights per day would be less than 100, last May 11, we hit a landmark. We're back to 350 flights per day. Pre-pandemic, though, is still far. Pre-pandemic, we were flying 420 to 460 flights per day. And given that the health situation is getting better, our operations is ramping up, and therefore we have shifted to hybrid work. Um, Perhaps to your next question, why hybrid? We strongly believe that hybrid really is the future of work. It combines the best of both worlds, right? Convenience and flexibility on one hand, vis-a-vis collaboration and networking on the other hand. I remember a Gartner study which pinpointed that when you give employees flexibility or autonomy over how, the manner, the matter on how they will get things done, it actually increases productivity by 18%. So there, we're doing hybrid currently, Dino.
And I applaud your openness, the company's openness to letting people do it that way. If you ask me personally, I've been doing training for almost 4 decades now, and it's really not the hours but the mileage that gets to you. So
Agree.
this work
Agree
from home,
fully.
I love it. I get
Agree
to
fully.
conduct webinars without the traffic and the search for parking. So I have a personal question for you. Um, as an HR leader, how how was your journey during this most difficult period in aviation, and what was it like for you during the peak of the pandemic?
Whew. ah, Perhaps calling the past 2 years and 5 months as extraordinary would be an understatement, Dino. As an HR leader, the experiences we went through as an organization, my own personal journey would be beyond words. It was truly the toughest time to be a leader, not just an HR leader, but as a leader in general during the pandemic. Until now, it is shaping the way we do our business. It's shaping the way we do our decisions. But like what I've said earlier, Dino, despite the hardships, Cebu Pacific, we think we were successful at carrying out the difficult decisions, like for example, the right sizing that we did in 2020. Um, Perhaps what guided me as an HR leader across all of the struggles and the challenges for the past 2 years and 5 months would be my own personal mantra, and I can it as my three E's: energy, eloquence, and empathy. As Cebu Pacific's HR leader, first on energy, I made sure that I just don't adopt to the energy in the room, but I influence the energy in the room. So that's the first E, energy. The second would be eloquence. And eloquence is not just the ability to speak well, right? But it's really more the ability to express with clarity and conviction the message that you want to put across. For example, why are we doing this change effort? Why do we need to do the right sizing? Why are we doing pay cuts? Why are we doing austerity measures? We need to ensure that people understand. So that's eloquence. And the last would be empathy. I think we wouldn't be able to do all of the things that we did the past 2 years and 5 months if the leaders, if the Cebu Pacific Bancom, the directors in Cebu Pacific, I as an HR leader did not show empathy to people who left the company because we had to do that painful decision, and empathy to the people who stayed and continue to journey with us.
I totally agree with you because a company isn't much without its people. The people make the company work. And morale is such an important thing. Sometimes it can be very fragile. And so uh, I can just imagine what you went through, the fires you had to put out. So I'm just curious, what sort of HR initiatives did you feel you had to carry out during the pandemic?
The first and foremost, and I think it goes for most companies, not only the Philippines but globally, the first would be on the area of health and safety. For health and
Oh, yeah.
safety, when vaccinations and boosters were made available, we made sure that we administered it to our
Okay.
employees and our third-party workers and our dependents. We made
Mm.
sure that clinic services, be it internal clinic services or external clinic services, would be available 24/7 through telemedicine and teleconsultations. We also partnered with a lot of groups with regard to discounted COVID testing for both employees and dependents. We even put up an isolation facility at the office. We've distributed, of course, care kits to those who tested positive. We loaded multivitamins for our pilots and cabin crew per flight. We made
Ooh.
sure that our staff would have their personal protective equipment. And also for the protection of both the passengers and our employees, we were, I think, the first to implement the test before duty using antigen for all of our frontline workers. So that is on the area of health and safety. For employee engagement, we continued to do all of our employee engagement activities, but we quickly shifted from doing the face-to-face, let's say a face-to-face Christmas party or sports fest, to doing everything virtually.
Yeah.
So that also tested our creativity and agility, right? But we've also added additional initiatives like we optimized Microsoft Teams and came up with what we call the one SEB community online teams. And there would be groups that talk about, let's say, physical wellness, spiritual, recipes, gardening, and so on. We made sure
Mm.
that mental health consultations would be available. We intensified further our communications
Mm.
initiatives like, for example, periodic town halls, periodic hands. We've also made sure that learning would still be available and converted quickly from face-to-face training programs to virtual training programs. But on top of all this, like what I've said, we also had to do all the painful decisions like the right sizing, our voluntary separation program, a lot of austerity measures, including pay cuts, not only in the leadership team because we had to role model as well, but also with our employees because, like what I've said, airline as being badly hit, we had to ensure that our liquidity would continue for a long time, and we were able to do this challenging initiatives while balancing engagement. And I'm proud to note that our employee net promoter score for 2020 was still very high at positive 57, and our engagement rate, because we do an annual engagement survey for the whole of JG Summit, I think Cebu Pacific was the highest, if not the one of the highest, if not the highest, with an 87% engagement score in 2020.
Outstanding. And I can validate for you how Cebu Pacific seems to be back on its feet because from time to time, my daughter and I like to spend time on the roof, like James Taylor once said, up on the roof. Diba? And so when we're there, counting the stars, we also notice that there are a lot of Cebu Pacific planes taking off.
That's
We
true.
we almost make it a game. Like, how many was that? How many did you just see? And then that to me was very reassuring. A lot of people think it's all about uh, passengers, but it's also about cargo, bringing vital cargo, maybe even vaccines to where they need to get to fast because those things expire really quick. So I have a question now. Um, when you first started out with Cebu Pacific, you must have had like an HR agenda when you began. Where would you be now in that agenda?
um, for everyone's knowledge, right? First 5 years of my HR career was at Miguel, and then I moved to URC 2 years, which is part of JG Summit. And then when my former boss and mentor Nick Lim moved and got promoted to JG Summit Corporate HR, he brought me with him. I stayed with JG Corporate HR for 11 years,
Ah,
and then after that, they said, okay, head be the head of HR of Cebu Pacific. So I'm now 3 years with Cebu Pacific. To your question, of course, coming from the parent company for 11 years, JG Summit, going to SEP, there is this high amount of enthusiasm joining this vibrant airline and being given opportunity to elevate the HR standards. So the first order of business really was to address the hygiene factors soonest. So that was the first order of business and ensuring that we maintain industrial harmony. During the time that I joined, that was the time that because Cebu Pacific for the longest time had been a non-unionized organization. But
right.
that was the time that they had a cabin crew union. So one of the first order of business was like what you said, addressing the hygiene factors and at the same time ensuring that we maintain industrial harmony and really partnering with the union of the cabin crew because they are our biggest employee segment. So that was the first order of business. Um, and then, of course, that was 2019 when I joined. And then 2020, 2021 to now, you know what happened, pandemic. But
Yeah.
we've made great strides on my first year here. We really addressed the hygiene factors. if you talk to the union officers of our cabin crew, they will tell you that we have been very good partners for the past years. They've been very supportive of what we do as a company to ensure that we are viable and survive and thrive in this pandemic. Um, I would say that the credibility of HR has been elevated. So I, as an HR leader, together with my HR team, we continuously conduct ourselves excellently in all our dealings. We give factual information. We are accountable for what we do. We act based on our core values, especially integrity. Because at the end of the day, I think uh, what's important is you're consistent, right? And consistency is always the hallmark of excellence. And of course, can I just again mention my mentor and former
Yeah.
boss Nick Liam? No, he would always tell me and tell us that behind every business issue is a people issue. Therefore, the role of HR is very relevant. It's very critical. And I'm proud to say that in Cebu Pacific, HR is there at the boardroom, really shaping what would be next for the organization, really shaping and influencing what will happen to the organization and our people.
It seems to me that you're describing a situation where HR is a player within the boardroom that's taken very seriously, a real business partner, as you were. So, what are
Yeah,
your key HR priorities? For this year?
um, we in Cebu Pacific we do our 5 year planning. We call it our OGSM, right? Objectives, goals, strategies, measures. When I started in 2019, I introduced a framework. We called it the SEB People Deal. So meaning this would be our deal with our employees. What I did during that time would be that I looked at data points from Kapihans, from town halls, from engagement surveys, did focus group discussions, and prioritize what would be the employee experience touch points that we need to address. So that was 2019. So we came up with the SEB People Deal. For this year, 2022, the enablers would still be the same. Four enablers: leadership, sustainability, digitalization, customer. But we are reshaping, recalibrating the old framework that they've done in 2019. So because in 2019, like what we said, the focus was really more on the touch points or the features on what employees get from their employment in the organization. But this year's People Deal, we will be pivoting from providing features to capturing more the feelings and the emotions. And I think it's brought about by the journey that we've had for the past 2 years and a half, right? We would like to create more meaningful impact by appealing to the emotions of our employees. So our initiatives moving forward are anchored on how they will evoke feelings and emotions, how they will make our employees feel understood, valued, invested, cared for, rather than plainly designing and delivering our plans. So if before our catchphrase for our SEB People Deal would be making moments happen, we are now transitioning to from making moments happen to making every moment count.
That's wonderful. I can imagine that it hasn't been easy for you, as a main champion for all of these things that you're trying to effect within Cebu Pacific. Um, so, as a result of your efforts, what would you describe as your work norms that have governed you through the years? Because you've described decades and decades of working with Nick Lim, and now you're with Cebu Pacific. What are those work norms that sort of like govern you or guide you?
Uh, two areas, right? Two areas. First is competence. Wherever field we are in, we have to make sure that we are excellent in our technical field, in our craft, right? So my work ethic is that I made sure that I'll be best in what I do, and that is HR work, so competence. But more than competence, the next area would have to be on character. And when you see character, you have to live by the values of your organization, and you have to live by your own personal set of values. And hopefully, your own personal set of values and the organization's values are aligned. And when you do these two areas excellently, then they'll get to see consistency, right? Meaning you're consistent in the delivery of the work outcomes that are required of you and your team. You're consistent with regard to how you manifest the values of the organization, and therefore you can be trusted and respected. And now it will all boil down to you being credible. And when you are credible, then again, it follows that you are part of the boardroom making the important decisions and directions for the organization. So there, that's basically what have governed my work for the past years of my HR career.
I can say that it seems that Cebu Pacific is doing a fine job of not only taking care of its talents' morale and having programs to take care of their needs, as well as the needs of your stakeholders, the passengers who fly Cebu Pacific. I look, for example, at other news feeds, especially what's happening in the US, where they're really struggling right now. Their airline industry could learn a thing or two from Cebu Pacific.
Oh, thanks
uh,
for that. Thanks for that.
yeah.
But
So
let's be honest, right? The aviation industry, yes, we're on the road to recovery, but not yet fully recovered.
yeah,
Don't know
yeah,
how long it would be, but we
mm,
hope that it goes there quickly.
mm,
In our case, in Cebu Pacific, Dina, it's a tale of two cities, right? Tale of two cities. Because the first city would be our domestic business, meaning our domestic travel, right? In terms of flights and capacity now, Dino, our frequency for a day is already higher than pre-pandemic frequency.
wow. Okay,
For example, Boracay, which is our most traveled
right.
destination. If pre-pandemic we were flying to Boracay from Manila 8 frequencies per day. Right now, because we had to optimize where we can fly, right? Our Boracay frequency for each day would already be 16. So it's doubled versus pre-pandemic. But the other city, on the other hand, which would be that's why I said tale of two cities, right? The other city would be our international business. For international business, it's still a fraction of what it was pre-pandemic, given all of the restrictions, right? Not a lot of international countries have opened themselves up. For example, borders are still closed in North Asia. Before you were
Yeah.
flying to Beijing, Shanghai, Xiamen, but now that we don't have services there, right? But like what I said, it's on the road to recovery, but not yet fully recovered. But we are cautiously optimistic as an airline.
I'm wondering. I'll just get off the beaten path briefly because I'm genuinely curious. How do you relax, Felix? I mean, given the pace, the obvious pace of work over in Cebu Pacific, what do you do to chill, to somehow refresh and reinvigorate yourself?
Uh, you know what? Things are better now versus when we were in 2020
Mhm.
because in 2020 you had to really do the painful decisions because it
Yeah,
just doesn't just affect you physically but it also affects you mentally and emotionally
yeah, yeah.
right now. And our challenges, there's a lot of work now, right, because we're wrapping up
Mhm.
operations, but somehow it doesn't impact your mental health and your emotional well-being.
Yeah, yeah.
So comparing 2020 to now, I'm in a much better place. But to your question, how do I relax? I really just spend it with my wife and my daughter. We often go out and experiment on what new restaurant would satisfy our craving for food, or we just spend time together. That's basically how I relax, spending time with my family.
In other words, finding balance between what you love to do, and who you love to spend time with. That's wonderful.
100% agree.
Yeah. Also, it means that you have a good working relationship with the union, with the in crew union, because their cooperation is absolutely critical to smooth operations. Hmm.
I have to commend them. I have to commend them. They were newly formed in 2019. We were in the middle of a CBA negotiation when the lockdowns happened. I had to talk to them and said, you know what, we cannot continue with our CBA negotiation, discuss the economic items. At the back of our mind, we don't know whether we can continue to survive as an airline. And you know
Yeah.
what? They said, Felix, it's fine. Let's postpone our CBA negotiation. Let's again resurrect that when things are better. And you know what?
Wow.
Through the most difficult times during the pandemic, they also gave up a lot because they also had pay cuts, etc. But they were very understanding. They were always there, willing to listen and to support us do the initiatives that we had to do just to ensure that the airline would continue to survive and thrive. So I kudos really to them. Actually, kudos to all of the employees of Cebu Pacific who are still with us now, and kudos to the people whom we've retrenched for understanding the manner and the matter at hand during those times. But can I just say as well, when we retrenched people, we had a commitment to them, and that commitment was when things are better, you will be first in line to be
Good.
recalled and to be hired again. And we were true to our words, Tino. Um, as early as November of last year up until now, we've again reopened our doors to retrenched cabin crew, to retrenched pilots, to some of the retrenched support staff. Those who would want to come back and are still willing to hustle and bustle with Cebu Pacific, we brought them back, true to our commitment.
Fantastic. And I can tell that with things improving, you are in a position to give good advice. So I'd like to ask you this question. What general advice would you give to employees and workers who, want to be successful in their respective career journeys?
Career journeys. I was asked this question as well when we did our recent Kapihan. And Kapihan is one of our communication initiatives. And I would, as an HR professional, we love acronyms so that at least people get
Yeah.
to memorize and really ingrain that in their minds, right? So my advice would be four Ds that will equate to the big D. The big D is your destination, whatever your destination is, right? So you have four Ds, and these four Ds will make sure that you reach successfully your destination. And the four Ds first would be the first one would be discipline.
Okay.
And discipline is really your habits or your rules to win, right? So you have to ensure that you're disciplined to ensure that you reach your goals. The second one would be drive. That's the second D. Drive is your patience to win or patience to succeed. Despite how long the journey would be, you have to still be at the steering wheel and continue driving until you reach your destination. So that's the second D, drive. The third one would be dedication. The third D is dedication or your patience to win, right? Long nights, difficult challenges, a lot of tears, but you shouldn't stop, right? You're dedicated to your cause. So that's the patience to win. And the last D would be your determination, right? The fourth D is your determination, your energy and the will to win, right? So and when you have all those four D's, then you reach your big D, you reach your destination. So again, that's discipline, drive, dedication, and determination.
Wow, I'm getting a good picture that anybody who comes from Cebu Pacific and manages to survive, thrive, and stay long enough to build a career will have demonstrated very good qualities that include attitude and skills because Cebu Pacific is a 24/7 operation. I mean, the work doesn't stop just because the sun went down. Flights still go in and come in. And I'm sure your engineers are also very busy. Like, for every hour the plane is up there, it has to spend like what, 4 hours for maintenance. So they're incredibly busy, incredibly dedicated to what they do to keep all of us safe and happy when we pursue our goals of vacationing, like in Boracay, for example. So, uh, in behalf of my fellow hosts and the show, I'd like to thank you so much for taking time out, and best regards to Nick Lim, because he was also one of our fine guests on this show. So I hope we can invite you in the future, maybe for an update on what's happening in the airline industry.
For sure, for sure. And thank you really for having me.
You're very welcome. So, ladies and gentlemen, now that we've come to the end of our episode, I'd like to remind everybody to not forget to click gently click. I won't say the stereotype smash or whatever, the like and subscribe button. Just a gentle click. If you like notifications, then do click on those. But coming up on season 9, episode 2, will be Professor Rene P. Domingo, who's going to talk about growth and sustainability. And he will be hosted by none other than Sylvia Guluyugo. And so, ladies and gentlemen, always remember that learning is a never ending journey with limitless vistas. Good day.